my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. And I am actually getting this one out before the date of publication because sometimes I have my life together. So today this review is for Privilege by Bharat Krishnan. This is, as the author described it to me in his email, Ocean's 11 with brown people, so I was immediately on board. This is a semi-futuristic heist story all about this Indian-American man named Rakshan whose life has kind of fallen apart, and he relies on some desperate measures both to get his old job and his ex back. There is this strange drug called WP, which non-Caucasians or people of color have been denied for a long time, but Caucasians are basically allowed to have it from birth. And yes, it took me a sad amount of time to realize that this is a giant analogy and that the drug WP actually stands for white privilege. They are essentially trying to steal white privilege. So this is all about Rakshan and his friends trying to steal, not from a Caucasian person, not from a white person, but from a very powerful Indian American, aka Rakshan's old boss that fired him. And I thought there was a lot of interesting commentary on things like there are these two Italian brothers that love to sell this story of, oh, we're descended from immigrants. We're the descendants of an immigrant who made it good. And they try to sell that story, but they also are laced with WP, and they have it all throughout their clothing and their jewelry because, well, yeah, technically they are descended from immigrants. They're still considered white with all the privileges thereof. And I thought there was a lot of interesting aspects to it where they weren't trying to get it from another, like a white person, but instead a powerful Indian American person. Now, this is one of those stories where not a lot of the characters are likable, but they're all interesting because as far as planning a heist goes, Rakshan and co are not good at it at all. They're pretty bumbling for the most part, and there's a lot of little quips that they make that are just on this side of, one friend constantly says no homo. They also make other quips about, a mariachi band comes on the subway and Rakshan goes, oh, I hate foreign music. And I think that is supposed to, say something that even it's possible to be a person of color and still, have those embedded stereotypes about other people of color. I think that's what the author was going for. But for me, the bright, shining part of the story was the FF relationship. So Rakshan's temporary fiance, Sadia, leaves him, and she's got this longtime best friend. And they made out once, and Sadia thinks about it a lot, and I was like, yes! Sapphic women, yes! And so there's this subplot with the two of them kind of trying to figure out because her best friend, whose nickname is Deanie, and I thought it was so cute. Dia and Deanie have known each other forever, but Deanie had a girlfriend in college that turned out to just be experimenting, and it hurt her, and so she's trying to figure out can she do that again, especially with her lifelong best friend, and Dia's like, oh, okay, do I have these feelings, and how do I tell my super conservative parents? So I'm all invested in this FF relationship. The problem is that it made me like Rakshan even less because a big part of his motivation is getting Sadia back. But I didn't want him to get her back. I was like, no, you let her go be a cute sapphic woman. You don't know. I didn't want them to get back together. So a giant part of his motivation, I didn't want to happen. And the other struggles with this story that I had was some quick plot elements that seem to race through. The story is not very long, about 170 pages, give or take. And there's a lot of subplots. There's, the FF relationship. There's also a subplot involving a young black man and the drug that involves police brutality. So trigger warnings for that. But it felt like so much, and it was trying to say so many big things in such a short period of time, which I've noticed a lot with indie books. A lot of indie publishers tend to have a cutoff where if your book is above X number of pages, it costs X amount much more, and so you're really incentivized to keep it short. However, it was almost too short here. I felt like there were certain things that needed a little bit more depth when you're dealing with topics as big as police brutality and white privilege and racism. I did appreciate those topics being addressed, and I thought that making it a giant analogy using the super drug was really intriguing. So the concept is definitely there. Well, it feels like a Deus Ex Machina. The giant, everything's good now plot point didn't sit well with me. It was foreshadowed earlier in the story that the drug can do this thing, and then the drug does this thing, but even then it still felt like a very, very, very easy solution to a very, very big problem, which goes back to this was a very short book with a lot of very big themes. So to wrap everything up succinctly in this book meant you had to kind of make some leaps to get to the end. But in general, I really appreciated an FF romance. I will always appreciate that. I liked the more nuanced discussions on white privilege and people of color essentially vying with each other for that privilege, and how while white people get it from birth, people of color have to try to like force their way into it through being super financially successful, for example. So there's a lot to be said for this book, and if you want these kind of themes and discussions, I would definitely check this out. For me, I gave it 3 stars. It is a trilogy. I probably won't be continuing, mostly because the parts I really cared about were wrapped up really nicely by the end, and I'm afraid that if I continue, they're going to be unraveled. But in general, I would definitely suggest this if you want not an experienced heist novel, but a bunch of lovable and competent idiots trying to do a heist. Which, you gotta know, these are not professionals by any stretch of the imagination, but it is still intriguing, and the interplay between the group is still compelling enough to follow, even if it felt like it was going just that bit too fast. So this would usually be the part where I say, if you're an indie author and you would like a review, however, I am currently hard closed. That means absolutely no accepting new review books because I have no self-control and I keep accepting way too many. So I'm going to be hard closed until I bust through a couple of them and get my list at least under 10, probably less. But thank you so much for watching. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.